Right now, time could be slowing down. Not enough for clocks to stop, not enough for people to notice, just enough to quietly destabilize everything. If time slowed by a tiny fraction, a few milliseconds stretched across every second, no alarm would sound. Your phone would still tick, your heart would still beat. The world would feel exactly the same, and that's the most dangerous part. Humans don't experience time directly. We experience change, motion, cause and effect. As long as those relationships remain familiar, the brain accepts them without question. Time could change its speed while you're asleep, and when you wake up, reality would politely pretend nothing happened. Physics already tells us this is possible. Time is not fixed. Near massive objects it slows down. Near black holes it nearly stops. Satellites orbiting Earth experience time differently than we do on the surface. A difference so real that GPS systems must constantly correct for it. That means time is flexible, and anything flexible can change. If time everywhere slowed evenly, there would be no reference point, no before clock to compare against. Every system would slow together, biological, mechanical, digital. At first nothing would break, but pressure would build. Chemical reactions would take longer. Metabolism would subtly adjust. Neural signals would propagate more slowly. Thought itself would stretch, just enough to feel like fatigue rather than alarm. People wouldn't say, time feels wrong. They would say, I'm tired. Work would feel heavier. Attention span shorter. Reaction time slightly off. Accidents would increase but not dramatically. Just enough to blame distraction, stress, or modern life. Doctors would see patterns they couldn't explain. Athletes would break fewer records. Machines would feel inefficient. Processes would lag. And no one would connect the dots. Because time slowing down doesn't feel like time stopping. It feels like resistance. But time governs more than human experience. It defines how energy moves, how particles interact, how stability is maintained. A slower time flow would subtly alter the balance between forces, especially at the smallest scales. Quantum processes would lose their rhythm, decay rates would shift. Atomic clocks would still agree with each other, because they would all be wrong in the same way. Reality would remain internally consistent. Externally, it would drift. And here's the unsettling question scientists hate to ask. If time slowed evenly across the universe, how would we ever know? By the time the first undeniable signs appeared, the change would no longer be an event. The first real signs wouldn't appear in human behavior. They would appear in systems that depend on extreme precision. Modern technology assumes time flows at a stable rate. Every digital process, every communication signal, every synchronized network is built on that assumption. If time slowed evenly, these systems wouldn't crash, they would drift. Tiny errors would begin to accumulate. Data centers would notice slight desynchronizations between servers located in different regions. Financial systems would register delays measured in microseconds, then milliseconds. Not enough to cause chaos, but enough to trigger investigations. Engineers would blame latency, network congestion, software bugs. They always do. But then the problem would spread. High-frequency trading systems would lose their edge. Algorithms that rely on nanosecond advantages would become unreliable. Entire strategies would stop working, not because they were wrong, but because the timing assumptions behind them no longer matched reality. In physics laboratories, experiments would start behaving strangely. Particle decay rates would deviate from long-established expectations. Not enough to rewrite textbooks overnight, but enough to raise uncomfortable questions. Measurements would still be repeatable, just consistently off. And consistency is dangerous, because when every instrument agrees with itself, scientists assume the universe is behaving correctly. Astronomy would notice next. Pulsars, spinning neutron stars that act like cosmic clocks, would begin to drift from predicted timing models. Their signals would arrive slightly later than expected. At first, astronomers would adjust their equations. Then they would adjust them again. Eventually, they would realize something disturbing. The problem wasn't local, it was universal. Stars wouldn't suddenly dim, galaxies wouldn't freeze in place. Instead, long-term processes would stretch. Stellar life cycles would subtly elongate. Fusion rates would adjust. Energy output curves would flatten. The universe would feel sluggish. Gravitational interactions would change rhythm. Orbital resonances would shift. Systems that depended on delicate timing balances would destabilize. And here's where it gets worse. Life itself depends on timing. Neural signals rely on precise delays. Muscle coordination depends on synchronization. Consciousness emerges from patterns that unfold over time. Slow time and those patterns distort. Reaction times would worsen. Decision-making would feel harder. People wouldn't describe it as fear. They would describe it as fog. Civilization would adapt by lowering expectations. Deadlines would slip. Productivity would drop. Complexity would become harder to manage. Large systems, governments, economies, global coordination would strain under inefficiencies they couldn't identify. No one would say the word time, because the idea itself feels impossible. Time is supposed to be constant, immutable, but physics never promised that. And if time were slipping, evenly, quietly, everywhere, then every attempt to fix the symptoms would fail, because the cause wouldn't be broken technology. It would be reality itself losing its pace. And by the time humanity seriously considered that possibility, time would already be moving at a speed we no longer remembered choosing. By the time humanity understood what was happening, time would already feel normal again. Not because it had returned to its original pace, but because we would have adapted to its new speed. Adaptation is the most dangerous response to a slow disaster. When something changes gradually, the brain rewrites its baseline. What once felt wrong becomes expected. What once felt heavy becomes familiar. Time slowing down wouldn't feel like a catastrophe. It would feel like life becoming harder to manage. Children born after the shift would never know a faster universe. Their nervous systems would develop under longer delays. Their perception of motion, reaction, and thought would form around a stretched reality. To them, this would be how time has always worked. Human history would fracture silently. Records from the past would describe a world that felt sharper, faster, more efficient. Future generations would read those accounts the way we read myths. Exaggerated, romanticized, impossible. Science would adjust its constants. Decay rates would be redefined. Time-based units would be recalibrated. Models would be rewritten to fit observations, not to question them. The universe wouldn't be considered broken. It would be considered updated. And that's when the change would become permanent. Because even if time had slowed once, there would be no guarantee it wouldn't slow again, or speed up, or fluctuate in ways too subtle to notice individually, but devastating in aggregate. Every complex system relies on timing margins. Remove those margins and fragility spreads everywhere. Space exploration would become increasingly expensive. Long-duration missions would suffer from compounded inefficiencies. Communication delays would grow, precision would degrade. On Earth, civilization would simplify. Complex global coordination would become harder to maintain. Systems would favor redundancy over optimization. Progress would slow, not because knowledge disappeared, but because synchrony did. And there would be no villain, no explosion, no moment of collapse. Just a universe that gradually became more resistant to motion, thought, and change. The most unsettling implication is not that time could slow down. It's that if it did, we would survive. We would normalize it. We would continue building, planning, hoping, all inside a reality that no longer behaved the way it once did. And we would never be able to prove it happened, because any tool we use to measure time would be made of time itself. There would be no external clock, no reference universe, no way to compare what was lost. If time slowed everywhere, reality wouldn't announce it. It would simply wait for us to accept it. And once we did, there would be no way back. For more curiosities and mysteries of the universe, like and subscribe to the channel.